Hi, everyone. It's Marcy here from PNS and NINA, and I'm super excited today. I'm always so excited when we have a guest. Bill Collins is here with us today. Hi, Bill. Thank you so much for coming. I certainly appreciate you.
Hi, Marcy. It's nice to talk to you today.
Thank you. So Bill is a title insurance expert. He is from Frontier Abstract, and you were a past president of the New York State Land Title Association. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
We are very fortunate to have Bill in our presence today. So I just wanted to talk a little bit in general about title insurance because I think we see that get thrown a lot. We see it on the HUD settlement statement. We talk about it's a fee. Tell me exactly what is title insurance? What does that encompass? Who does it cover? Who needs title insurance?
Well, so there's a couple different kinds of title insurance. So there's the two basic forms are owner's title insurance, which covers the owner of real property, and mortgage title insurance, which covers the lender on a mortgage. So the mortgage title insurance is pretty ubiquitous across New York State and across the country, in that because the GSEs like Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have always, up until recently anyways, required title insurance for their mortgages that they purchase. So before that happened, there was really mortgage title insurance really didn't get used very much. It was mostly just owner's insurance that was purchased. So not every place, every locality sometimes uses owner's title insurance, like upstate New York, where I reside. Everybody has to purchase mortgage insurance when they get the mortgage, but not everybody purchased owner's title insurance. But just downstate, in what we call Zone 2, everybody purchases mortgage or owner's title insurance.
And that's an important point that you make. So I want to point out to everybody who's listening to this, there is what we would call customary differences, right, between upstate and downstate, and even within certain counties. So while Bill and I talk about this in general terms, know that it might be a little bit different or unique in the county that you're in versus another county out
there. Yeah. So, and as to what title insurance basically insures against certain risks that are set out in the policy. And the basic, just starting with owner's title insurance, because it's kind of the simplest. So title insurance basically ensures that your title is marketable, that you have access to that land, and it only insures the land. Technically, it doesn't, in any fixtures. So, but it doesn't insure personal property on that land unless it's affixed to the land. So, so it insures your title to that land up until the time that you purchased it. So it's going to say that nothing up until the time you purchased it is going to threaten the title to your land. And if it does, if there is some kind of a threat, then the policy guarantees that the title insurance company will defend the title to your land. Subject to any exceptions or exclusions that are on the policy. So if the title search of the property shows that there are easements on the property, then those easements are not covered if they're accepted in title policy. If we find some title problem and it can't be solved before the closing, usually those will be raised in the title policy. And so we'll say, well, your title's guaranteed except for these problems, which the attorneys couldn't fix. And the other big exclusion that people need to be aware of is that a title policy doesn't insure against acts of the insured. So like if you did something on the property that caused a title problem to your own land, we wouldn't cover that issue. And as I said, it only covers problems that would happen up to the date of the policy, which is always the purchase date. So if somebody came in and started squatting on your land or made a claim that wasn't based on something that happened prior to the policy date, that wouldn't be covered in the policy. There is a form of policy, owner's policy, called the TOEP policy, TOEP. And that actually does cover stuff that happens after the policy date. So that's some stuff that happens after the policy date. So there's an extra charge, I think it's 20% more than your regular standard policy. But that would cover stuff like deed fraud. So if somebody, if you owned the property and then somebody forged your name on a deed and sold it to somebody else, that would be covered under a TOEP policy, for owner's insurance, but it wouldn't be covered under standard policy.
So with the increase of deed fraud that we're seeing all across the country, really, are you seeing that type of policy, an increase in that policy? This is the first that I've heard of it, so this is great information. I don't think it's fairly common, or wasn't. Do we see it making sort of a rise in policies currently?
It's starting to become a little more common downstate from what I've heard. Not so much upstate, where there's less fraud. It tends to be more popular in the places where there's more deed fraud.
Understood. And lenders' policies protect the lender, right? Owners' policies protect myself as the owner. Now, right. I want to make sure I'm clear on this. So, the search goes back up until the time that I purchased it. For an owner's policy, does that policy protect me the whole time that I'm an owner of the property?
Yep. Yeah. I consider title insurance to be one of the best deals in insurance, because you pay one premium right up front, and it protects you for as long as you own the property for an owner's policy. For a mortgage policy, it protects the lender for as long as that lien is an open lien. So
that particular lien. So should you purchase a lender's policy when you first buy and your, the mortgage was Bank of America, but then you went to refinance, that policy only covered Bank of America for the time that you had that open mortgage. When you go to refinance with even the same lender, you would need they would require a whole new policy. I'm saying not you. They require a whole new policy.
Yeah, I mean, if you refinance with a different lender, that's definitely the case. So, but you get a big reduction in the premium when you refinance. It's like a half off, I think, or more, depending on whether it's residential property or and then the same lender. But if it's a different lender, then you definitely need. If it's the same lender, then sometimes you can, like if you're doing just a modification agreement, then sometimes you can keep the same policy. The policy will continue to cover it if there's no increase in the amount of the mortgage. But if there's an increase in the amount of the mortgage, then the lender will usually want you to get a new policy to cover that extra money.
So let's talk about the term taking title. I took title of the property. He took the title of the property. We talk about title all the time. What exactly is that? Like, what are we referring to?
So usually when somebody says they take title of the property, that means that there was a transfer, a buying or selling of the property between the two parties. They freely agreed to exchange it. Delivery of the deed was made, and then hopefully that somebody recorded that deed. If a deed is not recorded, then it's a little harder to prove that you have title. But and New York is a race to record state, so you've got to get that deed on record as soon as possible. Otherwise, you could get liens on there from the prior owner that may attach to your property. But typically when somebody says they take title, that means that there was a closing, that the money was exchanged for a deed, and then the deed was recorded.
Right. All right, let's talk about the word curatives and curing the title. Sometimes we'll be sitting at a closing and you'll hear someone say, hey, do you have a curative for this? Do you have a curative for that? What do you mean you don't have a curative for this? What exactly are they talking about, right? We talk about title insurance, but to go a step backward to get to that issuance of policy, what is it that they need, or what are you required as a title company in general terms?
So, the title insurance is kind of a unique form of title insurance in that it insures against stuff that's happened up until the policy date. Like other kinds of insurance insure stuff that happens after the policy date, right? Like you get an auto insurance policy, it insures stuff that's going to happen, sometime within the next year. But title insurance only insures stuff that happens up to the date of title. And that's because that's the period that we search the title for to see if there's any problems. So once we search the title to see if there's issues and we find some, we'll raise it on the title report. And then, at least in New York, the attorneys look in the title report and say, okay, well, this is a barrier to marketability. This is a lien on the property, or this is a unacceptable easement or an encroachment by a neighbor. So we've got to cure that somehow. We've got to clear up that problem. And that could, like for a mortgage, that would involve getting a payoff letter and then paying off that existing mortgage. If there's a judgment, it would involve, again, getting a payoff letter, paying off the judgment. For like an easement that runs too close to the house or under the house, you'd have to, go to the holder of the easement and get some kind of a release for that easement. If there's a problem with a fence on the boundary line or some other kind of boundary line issue, you'd have to go to the neighbor and get some kind of a boundary line agreement or fence agreement. So there's a ton of different problems that could crop up and a ton of different solutions for each problem. But that's what's usually meant as a title curative, is fixing one of those problems that came up on the title report.
And that's something that, depending on what part of the state you're in, who clears that title, right? Sometimes it's the bank attorney, sometimes it's the title company or the settlement agent or title closers, which we don't really use upstate, but downstate do use title closers. So when you use the word terminology, title closer, it means different things depending on where you are. I want to go back to title insurance for a quick minute because I meant to ask and I forgot. I apologize. Lender's title insurance typically is not optional, right? It's a requirement of the lender. But now owner's title insurance is optional, right? So typically the attorney would explain that to you, but what kind of circumstances would warrant, let's say, an owner's title insurance policy, or what would it make more sense to purchase one? And then what would that cover? Like, give an example of what it would cover just in case someone actually ever had a claim, what it may be based on, or what would you say is a more common claim against an owner's title insurance policy, if there is one?
And just to go back to mortgage insurance real quick, not only does the lender require it, usually the lender requires the borrower to pay for it, which is kind of galling to first-time homeowners. Like, this is protecting this other entity, but I have to pay for it. But that's banks, I guess.
Mortgage lending. Welcome to the world of mortgage lending.
Yeah. So like a typical, you'd mentioned like in upstate, a lot of times the people won't get owner's and title insurance, and that's because attorneys will sometimes examine the abstract themselves and say, oh, there's no problems. But an abstract of title that, which is basically the search of the title, may not show every problem, right? If there's been forgery or fraud, for instance, that abstract would not show it, but a title policy would cover you in the case of forgery or fraud. If there could be errors in the abstract or errors in the public record that would not show up in the abstract, and a title policy would cover problems caused by those things also. There's a and I think that's one reason why downstate owners coverage has never been a question, really. Everybody wants it because fraud and forgery tend to be very common downstate.
Sure.
And more than that, though, too, I think it's because attorneys upstate tend to know their clients very well, so fraud and forgery is like less likely, whereas downstate, that's not always the case. People sell property, just hire an attorney, and the attorney has had no contact with them up to that point. So it's owner's title insurance is looked upon in most places in the country, and definitely in downstate New York, as a necessity. But because the trust isn't really there, you know. But it's definitely valuable for everybody, and like I said, it's an extremely good value. Like $150,000 policy, owner's policy in upstate New York, would be like around $745, and that, again, that protects you for as long as you live there, right? That would be like one car insurance payment, but it protects you for as long as you own that property. And if you get owner's title insurance along with mortgage title insurance, it's even cheaper. So usually if you're getting mortgage title insurance, it's only another $200 to $400 to get an owner's policy, depending on the amount of the purchase. So it's an extremely good value, and it also, not only does it protect you, but remember, it ensures marketability. So like if there's an issue going forward, if you have a problem selling it, then that's a loss that's covered under the policy. And sometimes it will allow you to sell your home with fewer expenses if you can provide the old title policy for the new title company to use as back title. So it's an asset that every homeowner should really have.
Yeah, and I think that that's used a lot when there's when there's a satisfaction of mortgage, right? That never gets filed at the clerk's office. It seems to be a common occurrence sometimes. But you talk about the cost, and I think that's an important thing to talk about. So title insurance is regulated under the Department of Insurance, right, in New York State.
Financial services now in New York State.
Oh, okay, a change. Good to know. So talking about the insurance, the actual cost of the policy, does that vary from title company to title company, or is that relatively the same, right? If I were to go shop for title insurance, which I in New York State am allowed to do, right? I can choose who I purchase title insurance from. So it's one of those shoppable things. Does it vary a lot from company to company?
So almost all the title insurance companies in New York State are members of a rate setting organization called TIRSA, Title Insurance Rate Setting Association, which is perfectly legal under New York State law. And so basically they put together their statistics, actuarial statistics as far as losses and risks, and come up with rates that they feel will allow them to remain liquid, to continue to do business in New York with an acceptable profit margin. And then they submit those proposed rates to the Department of Financial Services, who then either approves them or rejects them. There are some title companies that are not part of TIRSA that have a lower rate. They tend to be smaller and newer, and therefore don't have the claims history, a history of paying claims that the other the older and larger title companies do, that are part of TIRSA. And not to say that they're not, that they wouldn't pay a claim. It's just they don't have the same kind of history and experience of paying claims that the larger title companies that are members of TIRSA do. Theoretically, the member of TIRSA can also file for a rate variation, and that's been done by most of the major title companies. So actually the TIRSA rates are higher right now than what's actually charged by the title companies. I think it's like a 10 or 15% less that they all filed for a rate reduction for maybe like 10 years ago. And so by and large, but then all the major title companies followed suit after the first couple filed for that rate reduction. So basically all the major title companies have the same rates for title insurance. So when you go shopping for title insurance, mostly what you're going to be shopping for is service. So, you know,
Like
what,
ancillary fees right, there was a
yeah,
lot of conversation over the years about ancillary fees,
mm,
junk fees, right? What
yeah,
additional services are.
yeah, and that's ancillary fees are really only an issue downstate. Upstate, there aren't really ancillary fees. Ancillary fees tend to be things like municipal searches, um, that that are really only done downstate or demanded downstate. Also, certain kind of like judgment searches against the buyer for some reason. It's only like downstate lenders that want that done. Um, those are really downstate fees. Upstate, there are hardly any ancillaries. And but service is still important, right? Because you know, obviously different agents and underwriters have different size staffs. They can do things more quickly or efficiently or thoroughly than others. Some of them may have you know, like especially if you're using an attorney, usually the attorney actually orders the title insurance. So if he has if he has had good experiences with a particular title insurance provider, then he'll tend to use that provider because he knows that they're reliable and provide good service to him and his clients. Um, so usually a homeowner does not do the shopping for the title insurance. Usually it's their, at least in New York, is usually the attorney, and it's usually the buyer's attorney that shops for that title insurance.
On a purchase. Um, so it's unlikely as the consumer that I would ever see a copy of the lender's title insurance policy, right? But do I get a copy of the owner's title insurance policy? Is it something that, comes as an original and I need to put it in my safety deposit box?
Mm.
It's something that I can come back to after time and be like, hey, I can't find it, but you still have it. Is it like regular homeowners insurance, that kind of thing where I can go online and print it off, or I just call you? Is or is it like that actual piece of paper that I need to hold on to forever?
Well, you know, it's probably a good idea if you have one, just but you know, the whole idea behind title insurance is that hopefully you never have to use it. You know, the claims rate for title insurance is pretty low. You know, we actually try to get the rate down to zero, though that never seems to happen. You know, because you know, we try to eliminate as many risks as possible, but there's always, you know, the fraud and forgery and just human error that sometimes will cause claims. But typically the owner's policy is given to the buyer's attorney. Um, and then it's up to them whether they give one to the owner or not. And typically if there's a title claim, the owner, when they find out about it, if like papers are served on them or whatever, they'll go to their attorney and say, hey, I've got I had papers served on me. And then at that point, the attorney will go back and check and see if he's got a copy of that policy. But title companies hold on to copies of their policies typically too. So if the owner or the attorney knows who they got their policy from, usually we can provide a copy if there's ever one needed.
Right. All right. But it's good to know who the title company was,
Yeah,
just in case, so you have that information handy.
yeah.
My last question is, we talk about, title companies and title insurance, and then we talk about title insurance underwriters, right? A title insurance underwriter is not necessarily the same thing as a title company. What are we talking about when we talk about those two different entities?
So, you know, a title insurance provider can be either a title insurance underwriter or a title insurance agent. So, and it's kind of the same things with other kinds of insurance, right? So there's like State Farm, and then there's like State Farm agents. Um, it's a little different in title insurance from maybe from other kinds of, you know, I've never written other kinds of insurance, but you know, typically, you know, there typically aren't like branch offices of State Farm. There's only State Farm agents around, right? Um, and just like there's, like with health insurance, it's kind of the opposite. There's like Blue Cross Blue Shield, but there typically aren't, neighborhood Blue Cross Blue Shield agents, right? So, but in title insurance, you could be dealing either with a title insurance underwriter or with an agent. Like here in Rochester, there's two different underwrite, like Chicago Title and Stewart Title, both have direct operation offices in Rochester, but we as Frontier, we're actually agents for Chicago and for Stewart too. And we don't really have any interaction with those direct operations. We deal with Chicago and Stewart through their agency departments. So typically the agent, an agent for title insurance does almost everything that that the underwriter would do. So we examine the title, check to see if there are problems. We help you clear up any problems that are there. We issue the policy. The only thing we don't do is claims work. That's strictly done by the underwriters. And sometimes we'll do stuff to try to prevent a claim, clear up a misunderstanding or whatever. But by and large, the only thing that the underwriters do that we don't is do the claim stuff. And as a result, like for other forms of insurance, insurance agents are really just salespeople. They plug some numbers into the computer and make the sale. And then they get a yearly cut of the premium that you pay every year. Title insurance agents are different. So, like I said, we do all the work of the underwriter, pretty much up until the time of the policy. And as a result, we get a larger cut of the premium. Because we do all that work. So we're not just, we do sell title insurance, but we don't just sell title insurance. We have to do all the work that's involved in clearing up the title also.
All right, that makes sense. Now, if someone wanted to get information about a title company or title insurer, they wanted to shop around or they wanted to get more information, what is a good resource for a consumer, a notary, an attorney to go and get this information? This is a very leading question, I know, but where can we go to get more information about title companies, title insurers, title information?
Well, there's the New York State Land Title Association, right? That you and I are both members of. They would have links to the websites of the different underwriters, so you could check. I believe by law, like underwriters are required to have a rate calculator available to the public so that you can put in your purchase price and mortgage amount, and it will spit out what they would charge for the premium. And I know us as title agents, we also have to have rate calculators for each of our underwriters on our website. So if you're shopping to see like what kind of premium that you would typically pay, that's the easiest way to get a quote would be to just go on the website for the underwriter or grab a link from our site or the Land Title Association site and then go plug those numbers in. As far as like, shopping for service or whatever, I would say that that's something that real estate professionals would know better than the average homeowner, right? So because they do so many real estate deals all the time, they know which title insurance companies they've had good experiences with and bad experiences with. Your real estate attorneys will know, definitely, especially in New York State. Sometimes real estate agents will know, what experiences they've had. One thing to keep in mind, though, there is some cross ownership, with different, real estate companies and even attorneys with title insurance agencies. So sometimes attorneys are agents themselves. And if that's the case, then you don't have to use them for title insurance if you don't want to. A lot of times that's just easier. sometimes a real estate brokerage will own a title insurance agency, and they'll just kind of try to direct all their work there. So that's something that a homeowner may want to ask. You know, if you're being directed to a particular title insurance agency, you may want to ask, you know, are you getting part of the profits from this, or, you know, is this your in-house agency or whatever? And, you know, you may want to get your own, or you may just want to try to go with the flow, but that's something that's strictly up to the consumer.
Great. This was wonderful information. It really clarified a lot of things for us, I think, on our end. I so appreciate your time today. We might get you up for a follow-up down the road to get in some more complicated things. But for today, I'm so grateful for your time. And Bill, just to make sure, Frontier Abstract covers all of New York State. Is that correct?
Yes.
So we want to make sure that everyone knows out there that, title companies like Frontier, even though they're in Rochester, have the ability to issue title insurance anywhere you might be. So if you have any questions or looking for a new title agent, I'm going to refer you to Bill Collins at Frontier Abstract. Thank you so much, Bill. I hope you have a great rest of your week.
Thanks, Marcy. Hope you have a great week too.
Thank you.
All right.